Hello ladies and gentle ladies, and welcome back to the second episode of the Forge 1.20 tutorial for Minecraft modding. In this tutorial we're going to be adding items. So let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is come into our project, come into the main package and create a new package, and I like to call this init. And whilst, yes, I am British, it does not mean the same thing that British init means. It just means it's short for initialization, is what I like to call it. You can also call it something like registry if you want, or, registries, or you could even go, all the way and just say just going to test my spelling. Initialization. That's wrong, but that's why I call it init, because it's so much simpler. And this is basically where we're going to initialize or register all of our items, blocks, block entities, menus, etc., etc. That's all going to happen inside of that package. So, since we're adding items, you can take a guess at what the item class is going to be called, or the init class is going to be called. It's going to be called item init. Amazing. Some other tutorials you might find will call this mod items, for example, or also like item registry, or you might see something like the mod name and then items. So for example, it might be like tutorial items, or like if it was my mod, it would be industrial items. You might see that too. Generally, I just prefer item init. It's simple, it's easy to say, it's quick. It's obvious of what it is. That's just what I like to call it. But whatever you call it is completely up to you. You don't have to call it the same thing as me, of course. And in here we just want a public static final deferred register. And this is generic. So this will take a type of item, since we're going to be registering items. And I'll just call that items is equal to deferred register dot create. Then we pass in forge registries dot items, and then we pass in our mod ID. So we made this a constant in our main class in the previous tutorial, as you can see here. So we can just do tutorial mod dot mod ID. Now, if you can't do that, then that is probably because you accidentally made this private or protected. You need to make sure this is public so that we can access it anywhere inside of our code. So, with that done, let's explain what a deferred register is, or at least I'll try to give you a basic explanation. So basically, it's just a map of string to a supplier of an item, or supplier of whatever this object here is. So since we're registering items, this will only allow us to register something that is of type item. We create it with the Forge registry. This means it will automatically populate our registered items into that registry, and it populates them in there with our mod ID, so it doesn't do the wrong mod, for example. And that means that every time we register an item, we don't have to say what the mod ID is, because the mod ID is specified already in the deferred register. So it's basically a registry. We're going to be registering items to the registry, and then you can also get items from the registry, etc. So to create an object that can be registered, we want to once again go public static final. And by the way, I'm just doing PSF to do that. That's just a IntelliJ shortcut. It's quite handy. And so public static final, and this will be, since it's an object that we want to register, we simply call it registry object. Nice and simple, right? And this is of type, you guessed it, item, because we're registering items. Now, this will be called whatever the name of your item is. Let's say we're registering a apple, we would just call this apple. If we're registering a ruby, we'll just call it ruby. If we're registering a diamond sword, we'll just call it diamond sword, etc. I think you get the point. I'm just going to be calling this example item, Obviously underscores instead of spaces, just general kind of Java stuff there. By the way, I probably should have prefaced the first tutorial with this, and I might have added a clip during the editing, but it is very important that you do have at very least a basic understanding of Java. Not JavaScript, Java. Because so many people seem to think they're the same thing, and that pains me every single time. But Java, it's very important that you have at least basic understanding of Java. I will have links in the description to some places where you can learn Java. Just don't expect it to be quick. Okay, learning a language is not a quick process, but you have to do it if you want to make a decent mod. It's as simple as that. But anyways, that's enough rambling about learning Java. I'm sure so many people have already heard it a billion times. So all we do here is we set this equal to, and then we need to register it. So as you can see, we have our deferred register here. We called it items. So what we do is we do items.register, and then we put the name, which is a string, of course. So this needs to be all lowercase, no spaces, no special characters. All you can have in terms of characters are slashes. I think you can have dots. You can have numbers, obviously, letters A to Z, and you can have underscores instead of spaces. So for example, once again, we'll go back to the previous examples. You would do apple, all lowercase, instead of apple, right? This would be wrong. This would give you an error and the game would not load. So you need to make sure it's lowercase. And also no spaces. So for example, if you accidentally put in a space there, that wouldn't work. The game just wouldn't load. So it's important that you make sure there's no spaces, no special characters, etc. Now for us, we have an example item. So you might think obviously example space item, but obviously not, because as we just said, you can't have spaces. So you just replace a space with an underscore. Now this is only the registry name. This is not the name that shows up in the game. This is the name that, for example, you would see when you do /give at s Minecraft : apple, right? That's the name that shows up there. It doesn't show up as the actual name in the inventory. And we'll do that part later. And likewise, you don't need to put your mod ID here. So for example, we have Minecraft : apple. We don't need to do that because Forge already does that here. We passed in our mod ID up here, which is fantastic. So then we actually need to say what this item is going to be. Is it just going to be a plain old item? Is it going to be a block item? So is it going to place a block? Is it going to be a sword item? So will it function as a sword? And we can specify these different classes to denote what it's going to be. So for us, we're just going to make a normal plain old item. So it can't do anything special. For example, what's a plain old item in Minecraft? A Nautilus shell, right? It doesn't do anything. It's just an item. It has recipes, of course, but that's completely unrelated to the class. That's just a data pack thing. So what we do here is we do double brackets. So as we're starting a lambda, and this will be a supplier of the item class, right? So we're going to make a new instance of this. So we're going to just do a new item, and you'll see IntelliJ already shows us all of the classes we could use here, and you can also make your own, which we'll cover in the future. But as you can see, the top one is just item, which is what we want. We just want a plain old item. Now if we try to do that, that won't work. That'll give us an error, and it says expected 1 argument but found 0. And that's because we need to say what properties this item will have. For example, does it have durability? Does it have, is it a food, for example? Does it, what other properties are there? There's tons of other properties, and we'll go through them in a second. So inside of these double brackets here, obviously make sure you're in the side of the right brackets. You want to do a new item.properties, and that will work. Boom. That's all we need. So I like to just put this lambda on a new line as well, by the way. And you can chain stuff onto this, right? This uses the builder pattern. So we can do item.properties, and then after these double brackets, you can do dot and then pass in any different property that you want to add to it. You see there's only a few, so it's not that complicated. We can set, for example, a stack size. Let's do that. So let's say a stack size, we're going to put 16. We'll come out of those brackets, we can do dot, and then add another thing onto it. So we can make it a food, for example. So we'll do dot food, and we can do a new food properties, right? Food properties dot builder. There you go. And we can say that it has a nutrition of 5 half drumsticks, right? We can say it has a saturation of 0.2, and then we can build our food properties dot builder. Boom, it's now a food. And obviously you can new line this to make it more understandable. And then we can do something else. So we can go onto it again. Dot. We can say that it has a rarity of rarity.epic. And you can continue and continue and continue, of course. You can set like feature flags, for example, right? So that's what Minecraft did for 1.19.4 when they were adding features locked behind the settings. That would be a feature flag thing. But we're obviously not going to use it. It's not really a modded thing, but you can use it if you want. Just note that it is there. And obviously add any properties you want. And you don't have to use these ones. These are just what I'm going to be doing as an example. So you see I've also made this a food. Just thought I might as well do 2 tutorials in one, because food isn't any different, really. You can also add effects on here. I guess since I'm doing food, I might as well talk about effects. So first of all, let's put these on a new line as well, so we kind of have some consistency there. So you could do, for example, effect, and then just a supplier of a new mob effect instance. And this will ask you for a bunch of stuff. So I'll ask you first for the mob effect, which I think is mob effects dot, and then whatever effect. So say, for example, absorption. And then you can give it like a time, I think. So duration, 200. This will be in ticks, probably, not seconds. We can check, actually. Can we check? Let's see. So duration, we can't see, but it is probably ticks, if I imagine, because otherwise that would be a bit silly, wouldn't it? And then we can say the amplifier. So you might say, level 2 absorption, and you could say, give it a boolean as well. Not boolean. It is boolean, but you have to specify 2 booleans. You see there's also like whether it's ambient, whether it's visible, show icon, hidden effect, factor data, etc. You can do those as well if you want. I'm just going to leave it like that. And then you can also pass in the probability, which I think you have to do. You have to pass in a probability. So if you want it to have 100% of the time, it will give you absorption. You'll just put 1. If you want it to only happen half of the time, you'll put 0.5. If you want it to only happen, 1/12 of the time, you would just put 0.12 or 12% of the time, etc. I think you get the point. I'm going to just do 1 so that it happens every single time, so I can show that effect off. But that's all I wanted to cover about items. However, you'll see that this class is grayed out, right? Class item in it is never used. And that's true because we're not using this class. Just by making a register and registering something, we're not actually registering it. We need to tell Forge that this registry exists. So we use our main class for that. As I stated in the previous tutorial, this is your entry point. Everything kind of needs to go through here. So we make the constructor. We do public tutorial mod. And in here we can make a variable. And this will be something known as the event bus. Or Forge actually calls it an I event bus because they still use outdated C# naming conventions. Good on you, Forge. Good on you. I'm joking, of course. That's a terrible thing that they've done, and it should be sacrilege. But regardless, we're just going to call this the bus to keep it simple, and that will be equal to fml Forge mod loader Java mod loading context dot get mod event bus. Now what this is basically what it says it is. It's a bus, right? So think of a bus. Just picture a bus in your head. It goes down a street, it has a bunch of different stops. And this bus is exactly the same, right? So it will stop at each of those stops. It will collect its passengers, right? In this case, passengers are events, right? So it's something that fires. And then it takes that passenger to its destination where it performs, whatever its action needs to be. So we kind of want to add something to this bus. We want to tell it, oh, you should stop here and you should do this. So we can do bus. No, we don't. I don't know why I'm doing bus. We don't do that. We do item init dot items, which is our deferred register, and we tell it to register itself onto this bus. And you see that effectively it just adds a listener to that bus. So the bus will now listen to this passenger for when it wants to do its stuff. I think you get the point, but we'll basically need to do this with all of our registries that we add in the future. It's very important that you do that, otherwise it just won't register anything. So blocks are going to be exactly the same. You just do block init dot blocks dot register bus. Obviously we don't have that, and that'll be in the next tutorial, but just so you know in the future. Okay, let's close that because that's all we need for the code. And let's come into the resources. So we're going to want to create a new directory in here, and this will be assets. And inside of there, we're going to want another directory, which will be called whatever our mod ID was. So very, very important that you call it exactly the same thing as your mod ID. So it is just tutorial mod for us. And inside of here, we can create another directory, and I'll call this lang, which will be for your language files. And then since IntelliJ's done its thing, we need to do that again. So assets, tutorial mod, and we're going to create this time models. And inside of models, we're going to want another directory for item. And we're also going to want another directory inside of our assets tutorial mod called textures. And once again, inside of there, we're going to create another directory called item. And whilst we're here, we'll also do the same for blocks. So we'll do models / block. And we'll do a new directory, textures / block. And we'll also create a directory called block states, which will be something we do in the block tutorial as well. So inside of the models, inside of item, we're going to want a new file, and this will be our items model. So we need to say what model is it going to use. Is it going to be handheld, such as a sword, right? You hold it in your hand, it's held differently from, say, an apple. So is it going to be like that, or is it just going to be like an apple, right? A just normal item. Is it going to be held like a block, right? There's all these different perspectives and models that you can have. Say the trident, for example, has a different model to an apple. It's a bit different. So first of all, let's create the file, and then we'll talk about the different models that you can use, different perspectives, etc. So this file just needs to be exactly what your item was named. So if we come into our code again and into item init, you'll see we called it example _ item. So let's just copy that. And that ensures that we have exactly the same name. We come into models, we come into item, we create a new file. We paste it in there, and then we just add .json, JSON. And inside of here, this is just a normal kind of JSON, really. So we create our object, and we need to say what the parent is. So this is basically the base model that it will use. Now, since we're just going to have a normal item here, right, like an apple, we're just going to say item / generated. Now, what Vanilla has started doing is they have started prefixing this with Minecraft : Now, you don't need to do that. However, it's kind of started to become a trend of everyone doing that. So just, I guess, do that, or don't if you don't want to. Obviously, I can't force you to, but that's just what people have started doing. So I'm going to do it as well. And then we need to specify the textures. And if we come into this generated model, which actually I can't be bothered to open that right now, basically this will specify what the model looks like, and the generated model specifically will have several different textures that you can set. So the kind of default texture that you would need to put is layer 0 and then : and this will be your texture path. So for us, we first need to put our mod ID. So tutorial mod, then : then item / and then whatever the name of your texture is. Now, generally, you should have the name of your texture the exact same name as the name of your model and the name of your item. Now, just make sure you don't have any kind of texture errors there. If you keep everything the same name, you won't have issues. Now, it is very important you have everything here correct, right? If you had, for example, layer _0, that instantly would not work. If you had, for example, instead of tutorial mod, it was accidentally tutorial mod, that wouldn't work. So it's very important that you have these exactly as they are. So once again, for example, if you had items instead of item, that wouldn't work. It is very important. And once again, this is case sensitive. So if you put, for example, capital E, for example, mod item, that wouldn't work. So I think you get the point, but you just need to double check. If you do get texture errors, just double check all of these JSONs that we're going to be doing, all of the texture files, all of these folder names. Check that they are correct and exactly how they should be. Once again, for example, if you put like a space in here, that wouldn't work. It is very, very sensitive to that kind of thing. But yeah, that's the item model anyways. If you did want it to be handheld, right, you would literally just put handheld instead of generated. And if you wanted it to parent off of a block model, you would say Minecraft : block / and then, for example, like ice, and that would work. But we're not going to do that. We just want a normal generated item model. So let's close that. Enough rambling. And then you just need a texture as well. So I actually don't have a texture right now. I'll create one in a second, but let's do the lang first, actually, since we're here. So we need a new file in here, just en_us.json. Once again, I mean, I'm not going to say this too many more times, but just make sure it's named exactly the same thing. And you just want to put your name in here, really. So you would do item dot and then your mod ID. So ours is tutorial mod dot and then the name of your item, which ours is example_item. Or we can just copy paste that in so that we make sure it's exactly the same. And then this is whatever your item should actually be called, right? So ours is example space item. You can put capitals in here. This is what it will show up as in the game. If you're a data pack or resource pack creator, I'm sure all of this is very familiar to you and seems blatantly obvious, but you would not understand how many people get, you know, simple strings like this. They'll have simple mistakes with spaces and all of that kind of stuff, and I'm sure you guys will, right? I'm not going to hate on you for having that happen, because it happens to everyone at some point. It's just very important that if you have it happen once, you understand it and you don't do it again. That's kind of the whole preface behind why I keep overstating that you keep checking everything is correct. But that's all you need for that. By the way, en_us, that's just English US. You could also do en_GB, I think it is, and you could do the same thing, and then that would also work. It just depends on what language is set in your game. For example, if your mod is only in French, right, you would just do en_FR and change it to, you know, French. I'm going to test my French knowledge. Exemplar, I don't know, exemplar item, whatever that is in French. I don't know enough French for that, unfortunately, and I'm sure someone will tell me in the comments that I'm an idiot, but that's okay. Just put whatever your language is, really. en_US is just the default, isn't it, really? So, example item. Boom. Okay, let's create a texture. I'm going to create a texture, and I'll be back once I've done that. Okay, so I've created my texture, or really I just copied it from my 1.19.3 tutorial mod, and I put it in here, and obviously make sure it's the exact same name, example_item, and it needs to be a .png. That's also very important. It can't be like a JPEG, it can't be a GIF, it can't be, you know, AVIF, or whatever the other file types are. It has to be a .png, and make sure it's also like power of 2, 16 by 16. That's quite important. And with that complete, we can pretty much go ahead and run the game. So we'll once again run client like we did before. If you don't have that up there, once again, Gradle tab, tasks, /Gradle runs, run client, and we'll let it go through, and it should start up the game. Hopefully this should be fairly quick, so I don't intend to make a cut here. Please, Forge, I would appreciate if you load nice and quickly. There you go, look at that, look how fast that is nowadays with DFU, or data fixer upper. Super fast, super fast. So we go single player, we go new world, and after loading in here, let's kill these guys because they're going to really annoy me. And you'll see it's not in our creative tab though, is it? Right, example item, where is it? So if you recall, we never stated anything about creative tab. We never added it to one, so it won't be in one. So we actually just need to /give @s tutorial mod, and there you go. You see our item is there, and it's purple because we gave it a rarity of being purple. And you can see we can eat it because we once again gave it a food, and we get absorption. Look at that, for 10 seconds. Absorption free. Nice. And you should also see that it only stacks to 16, which is correct because that's what we set it to do. Amazing. So obviously in the next tutorial I will cover blocks, and then the tutorial after will add these to a creative tab as well, so we can get that working. That's all nice and simple, really. So yeah, that all works fine. If we go in survival, obviously game mode survival, we should be able to see this does actually function as food, right? So, and if we eat it, boom, you see it refills hunger, it gives us absorption. Nice, nice, nice. And that's pretty much it. And well, that is it. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Obviously leave a like and subscribe if you want to know when the next tutorial releases, and I'll see you then. Goodbye.